And we're back in our home gym, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this, hopefully, happy hump day here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, we have another extra special, hopefully, maybe not, episode. Today is the 29th anniversary of, if you're not a baseball fan in general, or a New York Yankees fan in particular, it's just not really that big of a deal, but 29 years ago tonight, October 22nd, 1996, was the night of Game 3 of the World Series. And it's difficult for people, especially if you're under 35 and you really have no memory of this, even if you're now a diehard Yankees fan, you can watch highlights and read accounts of it, but it's not the same as living through it. 1996 was the first World Series that I got to watch where I was, and had already been a diehard fan for years, but the previous time the Yanks had been in the World Series, 1981, I was 7 years old and I wasn't allowed to stay up late enough to watch the games. So my memories are fleeting. I remember the Yankees losing Game 4 and losing Game 3. They had big lead. They had like a 4-run lead in Game 4. Just an atrocious, horrible memory, like in its own way, not as bad as 2004, but that was a World Series the Yankees should have won, and they got embarrassed, blowing leads in 4 consecutive games. And George Frazier, no relation to Smokin' Joe, losing 3 games. That's a record that'll never be broken. No pitcher is ever going to lose 4 games in a World Series. That's a 0%. But after this incredible regular season, that the Yankees ended up with only 92 wins. You know, this year's Yankee team, for all the flaws, got 94. And the Dodgers, 93. The Blue Jays, 94. And editorial comment, people who think the Dodgers should be a huge favorite. No, it's their 93 wins was not an accident. This is not a 106-win juggernaut Dodgers team. This is a good team that has played great in the postseason. But 162 games tells a lot. And I think the Dodgers are due for a little bit of a downswing here. And the Blue Jays, who had some struggles in September, that's how the Yankees tied them with 4 games to go. They were losing a lot of bad games, but they seem to be peaking. And I see this as a dead toss-up. I mean, I disagree even with Jeter and A-Rod and David Ortiz having all their yucking it up on Fox. I love those guys, but this is a toss-up series. Don't kid yourself. The 94 wins for the Blue Jays was not an accident. And the fact that Dodgers only got to 93 is also not an accident. So the 96 Yankees had this magical season after having gotten real close to getting to the championship series in 95, as we talked about, the first time going to the postseason in the entire Don Mattingly era. They hadn't been to a postseason since 81, but it's important to note because a lot of people don't get this. It's not that Mattingly didn't have the support of ownership or that how could they field shitty teams with a guy like that? No, there just weren't enough playoff spots. There was one playoff spot for the American League East, one for the American League East, one for the National League East, one for the National League West. So you had multiple Yankees teams during Mattingly's prime who would go to the postseason right now. The 1985 Yanks won 97 freaking games. They were 97-64. Blue Jays were better. The Yanks went into the last weekend of the 85 season needing to sweep in Toronto. Good luck. They won the first game miraculously, then got blown out in Game 2. And then Game 3, Phil Niekro won his 300th. Don Mattingly hit a home run. He finished with 35 homers and 145 RBIs, or 324 batting average. What a fucking monster baseball player Donald Arthur Mattingly was. But they would have gone to the postseason in 84 when they had 87 wins, which isn't really that great, but they had the best record in baseball in the second half. They would have gone in 85. They would have gone in 86. They won 90 games under today's structure. They would have gone in 87. So that's 4 years of playoffs, the first 4 years of Don Mattingly's prime. They're going to the postseason if it's the same structure. And I'm telling you, those Yankee teams were all dangerous. They had big hitters, Dave Winfield, Ricky Henderson, Don Mattingly, Don Baylor, Mike Pagliarulo in his prime. You remember him? No, you don't. He was a 30 home run guy. He almost led the league in homers one year. The timing just wasn't right, though. There was always another team that was a little bit better than them. Whether it was the Blue Jays in 87, whether it was, the Red Sox in 88, whether it was the Blue Jays in 85. Whether it was the Tigers starting the 1984 season 35-5. That's not baseball, Susan. They were 35-5. The Yankees season was over in the second week of April. Because that's the way this sport was without the extra layers of playoffs, without the extra playoff teams in each league. You're 8 games out of first the third week in April. You know, sayonara. George should got to sell the team. You know, the same bullshit that you hear now. But we had the big rally in 1995. Made a postseason with a good team. You know, they probably would have gotten close to 90 wins that year. But then in 96, they came out of the gate firing. And the teams that had been the big teams in the division, like Boston, like Toronto, who had won the 2 previous World Series that had happened, 92 and 93, and then in 1995, obviously, the Indians got out of the American League and they lost to the Braves. That was the Braves' 1 World Series. Again, they talk about juggernaut teams. How many times did the Braves win 100 games and lose in the first round? I think twice. Baseball's a weird sport. They had the big pitchers, they had big hitters, a lot of Hall of Famers up and down the freaking roster. Anything can happen in a best out of 3, a best out of, more best out of 5, best out of 7. And then it just, you get to the championship series, it's just best out of 7. And I wish it was best out of 9. More baseball, the better. The 96 Yankees, though, led wire to wire. Like, there was a certain comfort in saying, geez, we're up by 12 games. We're winning the division. But even that great Yankees team, it's a great fan season, but the 96 Yankees as a team, pretty overrated. I mean, that's not a great all-time Yankee team. As Mike Francesa, the sports talk radio host, they were a good team that played great when it counted. They also got unbelievable good luck. And I feel like we're still paying for all the luck that we got from 1996 through 2000. It was fairy dust year after year except 97. But it was nothing but if somebody was going to lose a ball in the lights or an umpire was going to bump into an outfielder, which is what happened in Game 4 of the World Series. Jermaine Dye almost ran over the right field umpire and the ball dropped. Yankees scored 3 runs. That's not supposed to happen. But that Yankees team collapsed in August and nearly coughed up all of a 12.5 game lead. And the phone lines were burning up. Fire Torrey, fire Bob Watson. Maybe this kid, Brian Cashman, would do a better job. Maybe we got to sit Tino down. We got to sit Wade Boggs down. It's the same bullshit. Maybe Jeter isn't the answer. It's short. It's always the same fucking bullshit. When you lose, the fans lose their heads. And it's always the end of the world as you know it, and they don't feel fine. But the Yankees survived. They ended up winning the division. They got, again, very lucky. They won a crazy 12-11 game against Boston when I think they were about to only have a 1-game lead. That took a little pressure off. Then they got by a tough Rangers team in the division series where they dropped the first game out of a best of 5 at home. That was the old iteration of the division series. There was no 3-card. You went right to the five-game series, the LDS. The Yankees lost Game 1, going away. Juan Gonzalez was a monster. They were down 4-1 in Game 2. They could have been down 2-0. The 96, it was going away. And then they rallied. Cecil Fielder had a couple of big hits. And then Dean Palmer, a fantastic third baseman, threw away a bunt. The Yankees won Game 2. They rallied late in Game 3 and then blew them out in Game 4. Bernie Williams switch hitting home runs. And in the championship series, the Jeffrey Mayer game, right? Another unbelievable stroke of good fortune. The Yankees won that series in 5. And then you get ready for a World Series, and you're so fired up because the way the structure worked, even though the Braves won 106 games that year, that was a phenomenal Braves game, and they were the defending World Series champions. They had beaten a better Cleveland Indians team. Cleveland was going to win 110 games that year. They had 100 wins with 18 games to go. 95 was only a 144-game season because of the strike, which was ended by an injunction from no less than, at the time, a young Bronx district judge named Sonia Sotomayor. So we have her to thank if you're a baseball fan, because there was not going to be any movement. The owners and players were giving each other the finger for the previous year. But the excitement, the Yankees we're going to have the home field. The first 2 games were going to be at the stadium, and if need be, the last 2 games. So the fact that the Braves were a 105, 106-win team, and the Yankees, I mean, I'm telling you, in August and early September, the team was horrendous. They sucked. They were just losing every freaking game. They had a West Coast trip It was like out of the 70s when the Seattle Mariners with their 101 lost teams were beating the Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson, Ron Guidry Yankees like the fucking tin drum. Doesn't always make sense. So I remember I was in Atlantic City for game 1 with my mom and her guy who was, he was one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. They, were slot players. I had comp rooms at the Trop. This was when I was in my blackjack for blood phase of my younger self, the professional blackjack player. So we're in Atlantic City for game 1. And you got Andy Pettitte against John Smoltz. Smoltz somehow had 24 wins that year. I don't know how he could have had enough starts. I think he went 24-6. He couldn't have had more than 34 or 35 starts, though. So that's a crazy number of wins for, a 5-man rotation, as all of those teams had gone to 5-man rotations by that point in history. So we're so fired up. We're so excited. The ballpark is rocking. And, we're watching it at the Tropicana. The Braves don't score in the first, but Pettitte doesn't look that great. He doesn't look that sharp. It had been a long season, and Andy actually got better. His first full year, which was 96, because he was a big contributor in 95, but he didn't come up at the beginning of the season. He didn't really kind of entrench himself as a starter until later, and then he ended up starting game 2 of the division series behind David Cone. Like, that's how much they trusted him. He was already a number 2 starter in his rookie year at 23 years of age. Like, Andy Pettitte was just different. He wasn't like everybody else. But Pettitte didn't look that sharp, and say, all right, we got through the first, maybe he'll get his legs under him, maybe he will, maybe he'll start pitching better. Maybe he'll get his command, his cutter, because he just didn't look good, and they should have scored and they didn't score. So the Yanks came up in the first. He had 2 on and 2 out, and Cecil Fielder, who is a guy who is kind of, I feel like he's a little bit underrated as to just how good he was in his prime. And Cecil's prime went from 1990 through 1996. The Yankees got the tail end of his prime, and he was a great baseball player. He didn't look the part. He was a bigger guy, a little roly-poly, kind of a funny guy, but he was a dominant offensive player. He had so many big hits in that postseason. It was just amazing. He was tremendous in the Texas series, and he was amazing in the Baltimore series. He just one big hit, big home run after another. The moment was never too big. And for a guy who didn't look like he would be a great fielding first baseman, he was a terrific fielder. He didn't move around the bag as well as Tino, but if his glove could get to the baseball, he didn't drop it. He was good at scooping balls out of the dirt, and he was good on pop-ups. The guy was just a great baseball player. So the Yanks have 2 on and 2 out, tie game 1, and Cecil Fielder hits what looks like a 3-run homer, because Cecil had crazy power to all fields. Now, when I say this, Cecil Fielder was not Aaron Judge, but Cecil Fielder had power to right center field and right field like Aaron Judge. He was not, strictly speaking, it's funny, he had a swing like a dead pull hitter, but he was not a dead pull hitter. And we had seen in his time with the Yanks had traded Ruben Sierra right around the trade deadline for Cecil. Cecil could hit the ball over 400 feet to right field. He didn't have to turn on it. All he had to do was meet it with that incredible howitzer of a swing that he had. So with 2 on and 2 out, Smoltz tries to sneak a fastball on the outside corner past Cecil. And Cecil puts a swing that's a home run swing. He puts a charge in it. The fans go freaking crazy. And the ball dies on the warning track. Marquise Grissom tracks it down. And the air went out of the ballpark. We think that we're about to be up 3-0, and then all of a sudden, nothing. All of a sudden, it's just like, fuck. So the Braves got up there in the second inning, and they beat the hell out of Pettitte. I think they scored 3 runs in the second, and I made a decision. I'm not going to suffer with this game anymore. I'm going to go play blackjack. So I went to play blackjack. Mom, they're doing their thing. The Yanks got blown out. They lost 12-1. First World Series game in 15 years. And they had lost the last game at the stadium in 1981. It was kind of a blowout, not 12-1. They got killed. And then they went out the next night, and Greg Maddux, they lost 4-0. They never had a chance. Maddux, although he didn't have the best year in 96, he had won a bunch of Cy Youngs. They didn't have a fucking chance against Maddux. They were swinging themselves into the ground. and Jimmy Key pitched. He didn't pitch that badly. There were a couple of close calls. Key was a touch pitcher. If he didn't get the corners, he was in big trouble. He didn't have the killer stuff anymore that he had in the early 90s, where he was popping the fastball enough where he didn't have to be perfect with it. In the immortal words of Susan Waldman, by 1996, he had to hit spots, John. He had to hit spots. He had to hit spots. He couldn't just rely on the fact, if I don't get the corners, I could still put a 93 on this guy's hands and get him out anyway. He didn't throw that hard anymore. So Key got hit, and the Yankees put up very little resistance. They had one chance. I mean, it's pathetic. They were down already either 3 or 4-0. They had 2 on and no out. And Wade Boggs hit into a double play. The game was over. They were fucked. So they lose the first 2, and you say to yourself, we were a big underdog when it was a 0-0. Now we just got blown out of the first 2 games at the stadium. We're going to go to Atlanta. We're going to get swept. We're going to get blown out of Game 3 and blown out of Game 4, and we're going to get swept, and it's embarrassing, and we're never going to win a World Series, and Steinbrenner has to sell the team, and Jeter sucks, and Mariano's not that good, et cetera, et cetera. We need to think about moving on from Tino already. He's not a clutch player. Whatever nonsense. Fans are already sharpening the knives on WFAN. In fact, on Sports Talk Radio, everyone but Mike Francesa, they're all Yankee haters, they were just gleeful. And they're making jokes, we should stop the series now, let the Yankees tap out, this is embarrassing, they should forfeit. They're actually talking about this, they're going to forfeit? What are you saying? So going into Game 3, and again, it's difficult to put your mind into this. The Braves pitching seemed impenetrable. Whoever Atlanta was going to send out there, you felt like you can't even get base runners. The fact that they almost got 3 runs in the first inning on Smoltz was a miracle, and then the rest of the game went exactly the way you expected. We scored 1 run off the best pitcher in baseball, and then Maddox, you don't even have a chance against him at 70 pitches, 8 innings, whatever it was. You might as well could have thrown 20 innings. Now you got Tom Glavine, another 20-game winner in Game 3. And the Yanks had David Cone, who was not quite in his prime, and he had an issue with an aneurysm. He was going. And the Yankees needed something. They needed Cone to 6 innings, no runs, 6 innings, 1 run, something. Because they were able to, Mariano didn't pitch in Game 2. So the idea was we have to somehow get a lead. And then the formula that year, because Wetland was the closer, Mariano goes 2 innings, and Wetland finishes. And then hopefully we get out of Game 3 with a victory. And then, you take your chances. You just got to win a game. You can't go down 3-0. You have to win a game. So Cone goes out there. He pitches well. And the Yankees actually score. They score off of Tom Glavine. Bernie knocked in a run with a hit. And then the Yanks got another run. And Cone was dancing through raindrops. He had good stuff, but he didn't have the 95-plus fastball with the wipeout slider. He also now, he had better arm than Jimmy Key, but he also had to pitch carefully and pitch to spots. So the Yankees, Cone, he was so lucky to get out of some of the jams that he was in. You get a called 3rd strike, you get a pop-up, and the Yankees managed to carry a 2-1 lead into the 8th inning, but you still felt like they were going to lose the game. It felt like they were not going to win this game, that the Braves, the fans were into it. You think about how exciting it is they won the World Series the previous year, and now you have a 2-0 lead against a team that's not as good as you anyway. And you're looking at it, you just need, you win 2 games at home, the series is over. Like, they're not saying, we have to sweep them. They would have taken, let's get 2 out of 3, and let's get the fuck out of here and win the World Series in 5. We don't want to have to go back to the Bronx, even though we handled it, because you just don't know. Longer these series goes, crazy things happen, as we found, sadly, in 2004. And also how we found in 1995 that Seattle went home after losing 2 horrible games to the Yankees. And then they went home and they won 3 in a row to end the season and the career of Don Mattingly. So it's 2-1 in the 8th, and the Yanks have a guy on with 1 out. And Glavine was out of the game. And the Braves brought in Greg McMichael. Now, Greg McMichael had been the Braves closer, but by this point he was more of a setup guy, because Mark Wohlers, who threw 100 miles an hour, had a really good season, and he was good in 95, but he had a big year in 96, so he was the closer. But when they brought out Greg McMichael was a guy who didn't have overpowering stuff. He was a little bit like an American League closer for many years with Cleveland and Baltimore named Doug Jones. Not the actor, But Doug Jones was a guy who didn't throw that hard, but he had really good movement and life, and he had the ability to put the ball where he wanted to. And to some extent, he had similar sort of stuff. McMichael threw hard, but when McMichael came in the game, I suddenly said, you know what? This guy throws pitches that you can hit. This guy throws pitches that you can hit. Doesn't mean he isn't a good pitcher, but he's not Smoltz. He's not Wohlers. He's not Maddox. He's not Clavin. This guy throws pitches you can hit. The Yanks have to score here. You got to do something here. You can't just think you're going to, keep a one-run lead. We're going back and forth, my dad and me. And with 1 on and 1 out, here comes Bernie Williams. This was Bernie's first big season, 29 homers, over 100 RBIs, establishing himself as legitimately one of the best players in baseball because young Bernie was a phenomenal outfielder. And somewhere along the line, he started having problems with his eyes and a shoulder issue. But 1996 era Bernie, he could go get the baseball. He'd jump over the fence to make catches, and he had a plus throwing arm at that point in his career. Man, what a great player he was. So Bernie comes up with 1 on and 1 out, and I'm like, he's got to hit a home run. He could hit this pitcher. He's not that good. Let's fucking go. And sure enough, Bernie just mashed it. Bernie goes boom, as Yankee broadcaster John Sterling would say. But Bernie hit a missile. And when he hit the ball, all the air went out of the crowd. Just as the air went out of the Yankee Stadium crowd in Game 1 when the Braves began scoring. We're not scoring off fucking Smoltz. We needed that ball by fielder to be a home run to have any chance tonight. And 4-0, oh, we have 2 on and no out. We're going to get Maddox. We're not getting shit against Greg Maddox. Not that game. He's not giving up a lead like 4-0. What are you kidding me? But Bernie hit that ball. And if you watch the video on YouTube, all of the air instantly is gone. Because the Braves fans know we're not winning this game. We only have 6 outs. They've got a 3-run lead. We're probably not even going to get the tying run to the plate the rest of the game. And they didn't. So the Yankees winning that game, I didn't think they were going to win the World Series, but now you start to, they say, well, now you get greedy. It's not a question of getting greedy. Now you say, we have a decent chance to at least get the series back to the Bronx, and maybe we'll win a home game. Because we got embarrassed twice. 1 run in 18 innings. That's not okay. That's terrible. And this was not a Yankees team that was known to be a shitty offensive club. With O'Neill in his prime, with Tino in his prime, with Derek having a terrific rookie season, 312, 12 homers, 78 RBIs, Mariano Duncan hitting 340, Cecil. They had some guys who could really hit. They just, Wade Boggs, Charlie Hayes, they just didn't get it done in those games. So after the Yankees won this game, you felt a sense of relief that, okay, at least we're not getting swept. What's the pitching matchup tomorrow? So the Game 4 pitching matchup, was it Steve Avery? It might have been Steve Avery. I don't remember who the Brave starter was in Game 4. You know what? I don't think it was Avery because Avery came in relief late in the game. But Game 4 was the famous game where the Yankees were down 6-0 and rallied, in part because the outfielder got in Jermaine Dye's way and a ball dropped that it's caught. If the umpire is nowhere near there, it gets caught. But between games 3 and 4, the same people that were saying the series should be over were suddenly saying, now it's a fight. Now it's a fight. Because now the Braves are looking down the barrel of, we better win the next game or we're for sure going home. And now you could get a bit of a snowball effect going in the other direction. And we were just hoping to get back to the Bronx. And then the unbelievable comeback in Game 4, Leyritz with 1 out in the 8th and 1st and 3rd, Yanks down 6-3. They're down 6-0, they get blown out. Kenny Rogers, who was fucking terrible with the Yankees, but the Yankees won all 3 of his postseason starts. He sucked in the Texas series. He was terrible against the Orioles. We won the game in the Texas series that he started. We won the game against the Orioles. Yeah, Game 4, the game with the Bernie home runs. Rogers was terrible, but the Yankees just outscored the Rangers. I think Kenny pitched Game 4 of the Baltimore series also. The Yankees hit about 5 home runs in that game. He was terrible. Rogers got KO'd early in the game, but the Yankee bullpen kept it at 6-0. And then Leyritz, Wohlers is throwing 100 miles an hour and inexplicably throws a high slider, doesn't get enough break on it. Leyritz hits it out, and then the Yanks win in extra innings. Just impossible. Then they won the next game. Pettit, a rematch of Game 1, Pettit over Smoltz, and obviously that got the Yankees home with a 3-2 lead. And as much as you had the pessimism because the Yankees had not won a World Series in 18 years, you felt like they were going to win. When they went home, you go to Atlanta, the last 3 games ever at Fulton County Stadium, which had opened in the early 60s, mid 60s. I'm not sure when it opened, sometime in the 60s. You felt like now they were going to go home and they were going to win the World Series because it was trending in their direction. They had no business winning. They had no business winning those 3 games. They were very lucky to win Game 3. They were even luckier to win Game 4. And Game 5, pitcher's duel. The Braves made a bad play in the outfield. You win a 1-0 game. That is also, a high wire act. And that whole series, the Braves won, the 2 games they won were easy wins. All 4 Yankee wins were high wire acts. They were all gut-wrenching, nerve-shredding games. But obviously you take it. You take the suffering with the idea that maybe we'll win a World Series. But it's like my dad and I went into that game, and I know we weren't alone in terms of how Yankee fans were seeing, Game 3 of the World Series. You went into it just hoping, just win a game. Don't get embarrassed. And then you win one. And also, as Francesa and even the Yankee haters were talking about it, like Mad Dog Russo, now the Yankees are in position where you're just going to go out and play a baseball game in Game 4. And if you win that game, the Braves don't want any part of going back to the Bronx. You're going to put them in a very bad headspace. You're going to make them start to question, why is this series not over? What the fuck is going on? And that's the thing with baseball. It changes in an eye blink. It could be as simple as one lucky break sets a chain reaction, and then all of a sudden, it's a dam breaking. And the Yankees, David Cone managing to squeeze out of a number of innings where the Braves had a chance to at least tie the score off of him, and then Rivera doing his thing, and Bernie just lowering the boom. It's the way it goes. It's baseball. And that was for sure the best fan season. Even as I admit, this was a very flawed team. Of the Yankee teams who won later World Series, the 2019 was way better. I think they won 105 games that year. They were way better than the 96 team. They had bad stretches early in the season, but they had less flaws. They had Prime Mariano, and that was a really good Yankees bullpen. That was the one year they deployed Jabba Chamberlain effectively. Yeah, man, he could have been a lot better. Just arm and elbow and shoulder problems, and unfortunate. Ended up not really having that much of a career. But they were for sure better than 2000 Yankees with the 87 wins. The 99 Yankees were better than 96. 98 Yankees were also better. So that's just the way that it goes. Sometimes it's just the right time where everything comes together. And those 96 Yankees, they sure as hell played well under pressure. All the big hits in the playoff series, especially the Texas series, just to get to the World Series. And the Braves, to give them credit, they were down 3-1 to a not that great St. Louis Cardinals team in the LCS. And they didn't just win games 5, 6, and 7. None of the games were even competitive. Like, they just blew the Cardinals out. That's how they got to the World Series. So if the LCS had been best out of 5, Braves are going home. Assume, the fallacy of the predetermined outcome. If we assume that it was still going to be 3-1, then the series is over. They don't have a chance to win the last 3 games because there is no last 3 games. But October 22nd, 1996, the New York Yankees, who had not won a World Series in 18 years, rather than turn and run, rather than cower, rather than cash in their chips because they're down 2-0, they made a stand. They would not go gentle into that good night. They would rage against the dying of the light. And what ended up happening is they didn't lose any more games in the 1996 World Series. They planted their feet. It's the Captain America. Everyone's telling them to move. No, you move. They made the Braves take a step back, and then another step back, and another step back. And in the Bronx, they got it done. But that's a story for a couple of days from now, an oral history of Game 6 of the 1996 World Series. But today, 29 years since the Yankees staked their claim to Game 3 and the beginning of an extraordinary World Series victory. This has been episode 633 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your hopefully happy hump day evening here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.